The Long Way Home, Chapter 6, A Faint Scent. The smells of cooked fish, butter, herbs, and garlic permeated the small galley, and 5 figures sat in cozy light cast by LEDs imitating the flickering illumination of oil lamps. Jason hadn't touched his dinner of Zeno's fish and taproots. Nobody had touched their dinners either. There was a pall of anticipation in the way, a distracting uncertainty, as he and the other 3 children looked to Vincent. Jason could guess at what Vincent had to tell them. He decided to hold his silence anyway. Whether Vincent liked it or not, he was the captain of the Long Way, and telling was his right and responsibility. "Bad news," the man rumbled, and fell silent. The silence stretched, filled only by the ever-present hums and buzzing of the ship's systems. The Long Way herself didn't overstep her place. "Bad news is, we're a lot further out than I'd originally thought. We're past the predictive charts, while on the other side of the former Exarch Dominion." "The Exarch Reformation?" Trandre asked hopefully, as she leaned into Jason. He tried to be solid for her. "No, I mean past the old Dominion borders." "Oh," she said, as she shrank into Jason's shoulder. "That's right, oh. Now, we know the general direction to go." "Rimwood?" I asked hopefully. "Yep, Rimwood. It's just we don't have any chance of where we are, so we'll have to go by what our sensors can pick up with the hyperping." "Aye, mister, but I figure we can do something about the charts." "How so, kid?" "The planner was settled," Jason said, and laid a battered tablet on the table. "And I found this in one of the houses. Trendre might be able to get it powered up again, and maybe the ship's computer can pull something useful from its memory. That's if you'll let her borrow some tools." "Go for it. Can't hurt anything," Vincent said. "I didn't see any other evidence of settlements on my hunt. How were the houses built?" "Metal and plaster, with siding prefabs, looks like," Jason said soberly. "Colony world, maybe?" Stowaway asked with narrow eyes. "But what happened to the colonists?" "I figured they were attacked. Found lots of scorch marks around." "I didn't notice," Stowaway softly muttered. "Don't worry about it, kid," Vincent said, as he laid his clasped hand on Stowaway's head. "He's an R&I brat. They tend to pick up on things from the military types they hang around with." Jason slid the tablet towards Trandry and said, "Here, get with Mr. Vincent later about the tools, okay?" "Aye, sir," she said, and only grinned as he rolled his eyes. "I don't get it," Stowaway said as he ran his narrow eyes around the table. "I don't really understand either," Vi softly murmured, as she tried to fail to slow the twitching of her ears. "Please explain." "Well, to begin with, Corewood currents run faster than Roomwood ones. I don't really get why, so don't ask," Jason began, as he thought he saw the mischievous glint glow behind Vincent's eyes. "And the one we rode took us right past all the former Dominion space still being surveyed, so far out that even the predictive charts don't match." "Which means?" Stowaway asked with an impatient click of his beak. Jason decided he disliked the smirk creeping across Vincent's mug as he said with patience, "That means we're not a month or 2 out of Republican or CRP space. We're at least a year out." The smirk became a grin, and Jason said, "Don't you dare, mister." "You know, you make a pretty good co-pilot," Vincent said as the grin widened and his eyes sparkled with glee. "Don't you do it. And you're a good leader, too. Some might even say you took command, kid. Stop it, mister. Stop it right now. I kind of think I might need a lieutenant for such a long trip," Vincent said as he broke out in a mirthful, mischievous smile. Vincent had the immense satisfaction of watching the kid actually act like a kid as he turned beet red and looked around in a wild panic for escape. "No!" he cried when one was not forthcoming, and buried his face in his hands, mumbling, "Nobody will ever let me lift this down." Vincent couldn't contain his mirth as he wheezed. "I didn't believe it was true." "The youngest George ever to be commissioned," Trandre japed. Stowaway looked to the George boy, then towards Vincent and said, "Didn't think that was true." "That not a one of us wants to be an officer," the blushing boy moaned miserably. "Please, take it back, mister. It's not even an infantry commission." "Chief, then," Vincent compromised as he reached over and gently chucked the George kid on the chin. "And you need to learn how to take a compliment. Good God, kid, I always thought I was just a story." "People always ready to doubt the truth and swallow a lie," he muttered darkly. "It's a lot more exciting to believe in a family destined for greatness and glory, and ignore every cross with a George under it in repose." "I'm sorry, kid. That's not what I meant," Vincent softly told him. The George kid just stabbed at fish with his fork and crammed some of the flaky white meat into his mouth. An uneasy silence fell over the table, and it sat there until he swallowed his bite back and with dire menace. "Fine, I'll be your chief, sir, but remember, I'll get your back for this. When you least expect it, you'll be pranked. The fish tastes good, Vi. Thanks for catching and cooking it." "Tran helped," Vi mumbled with a nervous flick of her ears. A little, Trandre muttered, and everyone tucked in. Trandre jostled her cousin, and he gave her a wan grin full of exasperated humor. I have my own lead, Vincent said as he took his own bite. It was delicious, especially in comparison to what might have been a generously called his usual fare. I ran a hyperping, and there's a system about a week rumored by Woodishans and with heavy EMT activity. A couple gas giants and potentially multiple habitable worlds. Could be good smart to passively gather a little data. Vincent watched calculations behind the George boy's eyes before he said, We're good on supplies. We can keep having proper meals like this for a month or a little more. Seasonings will be a problem after that, unless we can find tasty herbs of some kind in the wild. Noted, Vincent said. The main thing will be the hyperspace journey. I'm not traveling alone anymore, so I can't just, Hi, mister. I'll split watch with you. 4 on, 4 off. Should work, Vincent said. He needed a drink. Memories of Cal needed banishing once more. In the morning, the long way had of full water tanks, fresh air, and lifted off the planet under Vincent's steady hand, while the smells of another cooking breakfast tantalized him from the galley. The George boy had given him coffee. He checked it, and it was just coffee. One translation to hyperspace data, and he took his coffee into the galley, and to sup on sausages, potatoes, from the pirate ship, and fresh fruit. The kids chatted mostly about various shows, movies, and entertainers they liked. Vincent didn't really understand most of their references. Then, after he showed the kids how to adjust the gravity in the weight room, he pulled a 4-hour shift, followed by 4 hours off, then another shift, then a return to the bottle to find sleep enough to do it all again. However, sleep was not forthcoming as he'd hoped, however. He stumbled out of his cramped room to answer nature's call and noticed that the George boy wasn't alone in the cockpit. He saw to his business, washed his hands and face, and decided that he could pull the double shift instead of numbing himself to sleep. He stopped, however, in the threshold when he noticed that George boy and his cousin were speaking to each other in the soft, quiet language of the Star Sailors. Quiet, but still translated by his implant for him. Are you mad at me? She was asking. Oh yes, I'm super mad that you pulled a trick on me, the George kid scoffed sarcastically. Oh, I'm sorry. Starstrand, he said, as he reached across the console between the pilot's and co-pilot's seats to gently chuck her chin with his knuckles. That was sarcasm. Of course I'm not mad at you. It was a fine joke. Oh, sorry, she mumbled again. It seemed to Vincent that the kid forced a deep chuckle. You got me good. Maybe not as good as you were meant to, but to everyone else that's going to be real funny. The girl giggled softly before she said, I don't know if I can get this thing powered up. It's a long shot, but if anyone can do it, you can. Besides, if it's too wrecked to get anything useful off of, you might be able to use the parts or something else later. Aye, she said brightly. Just as long as you, Tran, you're good at this kind of thing. I don't think you can magically fix anything. All we need is for you to try. If it works, good. If it doesn't, we try something else. Vincent shrank back into the shadows to give them privacy. He could wear himself out in the weight room instead. End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.